Welcome to another episode of the Black Doctor Collective podcast. This week we have Dr. Jeannie Lawrence. She is a board certified psychiatrist and transformational life coach. I can attest to her coaching expertise. She is a best-selling author and founder and CEO of Sanctuary for Women Physicians, the first and only holistic life coaching experience that gives women doctors access to life transforming power of coaching and the expertise of a board certified psychiatrist and therapist all in one. It's like a one-stop shop. It's better than Target. Her mission is to empower women physicians to create lives that feel as good inside as the world sees on the outside. So welcome, Dr. Jeannie.
Thank you,
Oops.
Dr. Shanika. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so excited. Yeah, so of course I know you, but the audience does not. So I would love for you to just share your story, just talk about your journey into medicine, if you will.
Okay. So take it all the way back. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. I'm the oldest of three. Great parents. My mom was a registered nurse for 30 or 40 years. And I think that's probably where the seed was planted for my journey into medicine. When I was a little girl, she would take me and my sister to the hospital. We were both candy stripers. We wore like the little red and white uniform. And yes, super, super cute. And
I'm gonna need photo evidence, so you just go ahead
okay,
and slip that into my messages here so I can see that.
okay. Yeah. Me and my sister, by the way, look alike. There's a 1 year difference between us. So people would think we were twins. Anyway, the two of us in our little candy stripe uniforms, I think we were pretty cute back then. But that was my introduction to the hospital setting. My mom, in addition to letting us volunteer as candy stripers, would at other points in my childhood and teenage years would take me to her unit, like where she worked, to meet her nurse friends, to meet her doctor colleagues. And so I got a familiarity from a young age of just being a little bit in clinical settings. I appreciate now that she was using the connections that she had to bring me into that world a little bit. So yeah, that being said, I had no thoughts back then of being a doctor or a nurse, not a one. Um, I was very much a multi-passionate person, and I still am. I was into the arts heavily. I sang in all the choirs. I used to act in plays. I loved English and literature. I was like very good at writing. And so I actually thought I was going to do something in that realm. I struggled in college to decide on my major because I was really passionate about English and wanting to write and read all the things, but I also really like biology too. And so it was neck and neck for a while. And I didn't decide until the last minute. I think we had until the end of sophomore year, right, to declare our major. And so, like, down to the wire, and very true to my current nature, I was writing pros and cons lists and calling my mom, and you have to make a decision. So I went with biology. And the rest is kind of history. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with biology. Again, even at that point, it wasn't to become a doctor. I just liked the subject. And as I think about it, I just do things that I really enjoy. That's like my North Star. I do what's in my heart to do. But I think it was my junior year of college. I had an opportunity to volunteer at a free medical clinic that was close to my college. And that's when I really started thinking the medical field might be something I was interested in. I really like the idea in the clinic setting of just helping people. We were working with an underserved population who had no insurance, and it was just really cool to be there and serve those folks. And yeah, that's when I started thinking something medical. Still wasn't convinced I was going to be a doctor. I actually thought I was going to be, and I took whatever exams they take. I shadowed a PA, like I was like ready to go down that route. And then I don't know, I just reflected and I thought my grades are strong, and I think I'll just try the doctor route. And so that's at the very last minute, once again, I
Wow.
decided I was going to go to med school and be a doctor. So
Wow.
that's my journey to medicine.
You're preaching to the choir because I changed my major senior year of college. Okay. And had to take organic chemistry over the summer because I hadn't taken it. And so, I mean, that was good for me because it was the only class I was taking and that it did require that kind of focus because Lord. But also, I then went to grad school because I couldn't decide if I wanted to go into medicine or not. So trust me, your journey is actually still pretty straightforward
Yeah.
because you at least made the decisions by closing time, you know?
Right. At the
So,
final moment. But yes, it was that by closing time.
yes. So, okay, so you went to med school, you went to residency, you chose psych, right? You went through that. What was that like for you? What was residency like? What was the journey into psychiatry?
Yeah, all those things. So so I go to med school and I assumed that I would do something that was familiar, internal medicine, family medicine, pediatrics, like things I had heard of and
Mhm.
seen before. I did not know going into med school that psychiatry was a medical specialty or anything like that. And I always tell this story. I was on a tour with one of the deans of our medical school who happened to be a psychiatrist, and she was a Black female doctor. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that psychiatry was a medical specialty. I didn't know psychiatrists were medical doctors. And she just looked at me and she was super gracious and was like, yeah, it's a specialty. Yeah, you can choose that, like you are medical doctors. And so anyway, that's when I learned that was even a possibility after putting my foot in my mouth on that
I was
tour.
gonna say, I was gonna say, I'm sure she loved that moment where she's counting all my years of struggle. It's fine. Not
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, feeling the same way I would now if somebody said that to me. But yeah, she was super gracious, knowing she was dealing with a pre-med student. But yeah, I went through all of my rotations like we all do, and I liked most of my rotations well enough. Psychiatry, I think, was the last or second to last rotation that I did through the major specialties, and it just clicked for me. It really, I really just enjoyed the patients and the work that we were doing, and yeah, it was just like hand in glove. Like I just had a totally different feeling on that rotation. And so I knew that was going to be my specialty. I always tell the story too of how I had some opposition with that because I think my family and friends who were very proud of me for getting into med school, because I was like the only physician in the family and all this stuff, were taken aback when I chose psychiatry as a specialty. I don't know where psychiatry ranks these days in terms of popularity, but like when I was going through school, there were very few of us that were going into that field. And so again, family and friends were really like that. Why don't you just be a family medicine doctor or be something that
Yeah.
they were familiar with as well? I even had an attending, my internal medicine attending on rotation told me like in no uncertain terms, yeah, don't go into that field. And so yeah, I had opposition on a lot of
Wow.
sides. But
That is
again,
so interesting.
yeah.
I feel like, I mean, so my roommate from med school went into psych, and
Mhm.
when she said it, I was like, oh, okay, cool. But I
Yeah.
could see that, especially in the Black community, people were like, you want to talk about feelings?
Mhm.
You want
Yeah.
to what? Or you think that everyone's crazy. Their favorite word. The favorite word is everyone's crazy. Those are the only two visions I think people have for it in their head when it's such a vast field.
Yeah. I think it is limited to those things, especially, and it's just, there aren't a lot of Black psychiatrists, there are not a lot of Black doctors, period. Going down this road, of course, in the Black community, lots of people, there's stigmas everywhere, but it's like super high in the Black community and a lot of avoidance of any conversation around mental health or seeing a psychiatrist or anything like that. And so, yeah, lots of opposition and kind of raised eyebrows, but I had to do what was in my heart. That's what it was. That's what felt right to me. And I am really glad that I made that decision. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, kudos to you for making the choice of, especially after seeing the opposition, because you might love something, but a lot of people do get easily swayed out of following their dreams because they are afraid of the judgment of other people. So, and I also think like the only way to shift the culture, the stigma around mental health really is to have more people in our community involved. And so, yay.
Yeah, I agree. We need to see people that look like us in these fields. And so, yeah, I'm glad I'm here.
Yes. Okay. So there's clinical work, but you are also a coach. And so I'm curious as to what led you to pursue entrepreneurship and go down this pathway.
Yeah. I think that seed was planted probably a couple years out of residency. Back then, I was in my first job out of residency. I really liked the work. There were some politics and things that I had to navigate as a young physician, but I really enjoyed the work that I was doing. But like I said, I've always had interests outside of medicine. I've always been multi-passionate. Back then, I was listening to a lot of podcasts. I feel like this is when podcasts first became a thing, or when they first got introduced to me, and I would be drawn to listen to the podcasts, especially of Black women entrepreneurs who were creating these businesses and living life on their terms. And they all seemed to have all this freedom to do all these things that they enjoyed. And they had this work-life balance that I thought was so cool. And so I was listening to these podcasts, even in my regular psychiatrist job, and just daydreaming a little bit, like, wow, I wonder what that'd be like to be like them in that way and have a business of my own. Um, it stayed there for a long time. I didn't know anything about how to make anything happen or exactly what I would want to do in entrepreneurial world. So yeah, it was just thoughts for a long time. And there was some point when I started thinking about I was going to start a practice. And again, didn't know anything about coaching or anything like that. And so it was me and trying to figure it out on my own. Didn't get very far with that. And so when I really made the jump into entrepreneurship, it was around 2020, which was a crazy year because of the pandemic and then just all the things that were happening politically and socially in the world. It was just a crazy year. And my instinct at that time, I wanted to be of service in some way. I guess that's, now that I'm reflecting, that's a common thread for me as well. I felt drawn to help in some way. And of course, I was like still working my psychiatrist job. So I was having some impact, I suppose, on the patients that I was seeing, but we were all spending all this time online. The world was just so upside down and crazy. Nobody knew what to do. If you can imagine, this seems so long ago now, but March of 2020, when we're first learning about the pandemic, there is no treatment, no cure, no PPE, or nothing, right? It was just a really upside down time. And
Destitute times.
it was destitute times, yeah. And being online and just away from each other, I was hearing the struggle of people around me. Everybody's, I'm so anxious, I can't sleep, I don't know what to do, I'm so stressed. One way that I can contribute is by writing. Before the pandemic hit, I had a blog that nobody saw. I was working on a little private blog, but I was too
I was gonna
introverted.
say, I never heard this.
I'm telling you. So I was too introverted and shy to publish it. And so I had articles that I had written. But anyway, when the pandemic came out, it gave me that push to just hit publish on my blogs because they were about mental health and personal development. And I thought they might be of service to somebody who would read them. And so that started me blogging, and I blogged regularly for quite a while on those topics. It's still up on the interweb, my first blog. So anyway, the question was about entrepreneurship. So from the blog, I developed I forayed that later into my first business because I was sharing the blog online, and I was sharing it sometimes in physician groups. I was also seeing, again, in the pandemic, everybody's sharing their stuff online. Physicians were really struggling, obviously, having to be on the front lines and really deal with the pandemic in an even more different way than the general public. And people were really resonating with what I was writing, especially about being a physician and a high functioning person who looked really good on the outside, but inside and behind the scenes was struggling. And so that's when I transitioned the writing into a business.
Yeah. And I love this concept. This is one of my favorite things that you say is that high functioning is dysfunctional. Remember the first time you said that, I was like, not just cleaning my edges straight off my scalp, because I definitely thought I was very functional, but it's
Yeah.
fine. But yeah, I love that you say that in your business that you want to create a life that looks as good on the inside, that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. And also this, that we are these people that are high functioning, that we are pushing through. We look like I almost have started to hate the term Black girl magic because it does add this expectation that we have to be pushing through and sparkling all the time, and we're facing adversity and we're coming out on top and all of that. And I think that part of your message literally counters that. And it's no, you can rest, you can sit down. I would love for you to just talk a little bit about that concept. And because I'm sure there's a lot of people in this audience, like myself, that are high functioning and don't even realize it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really my area of passion. When I start thinking about why I was drawn to talk specifically to physicians and specifically about high functioning, but suffering on the inside, it's because part of it is because I spent so many years as a traditional psychiatrist, and the people I would see would be super sick, and you would see it. My first job as a psychiatrist was with an ACT team. For any psychiatrists out there, that stands for, it's an acronym that means assertive community treatment. My job was to help patients with severe and persistent mental illness like schizophrenia and things like that, along with a team of other professionals, nurses and therapists and things, to help those folks live successfully in the community, because otherwise they would be spending all of their lives in institutions and hospitals, and sometimes incarcerated because of their mental illness. So these were very sick people, and it was very obvious that they were very sick. Again, they were bouncing back to the hospital all the time, or getting picked up by the police and things like that, or overtly displaying psychotic symptoms. And so these programs were created to help these people who were so obviously suffering. And that's what I did. And that's what I loved in my early days. So contrast that with the physician who, when you look at us, looks like completely is the exact opposite, right? High functioning, put together, has the education, the career, is helping people, making money according to everybody else, right? From the outside looks very successful, and is very successful, and has all the markers of not only success, but the opposite of what we in the mental health fields identify as like a marker of severity of illness. We're just the opposite. I did a talk in New Orleans a couple of years ago at something called Psych Congress, which is a big national psychiatric conference. And one of the things that I pointed out when in my training is that we measure the severity of mental illness, we used to anyway, by something called the Global Assessment Functioning Scale. And so the lower functioning a person with mental illness is, the more severe their illness is, the higher they score
Right.
in terms of severity on that scale. And what's so interesting is that by that scale and by that measure, a physician, right, who is very high functioning, again, working and doing all the things and is well put together, even if they have a mental illness or suffering in some way, they get missed, right? Because they don't meet that,
Yep.
you can't see it. You can't see it. It doesn't
Yeah.
line up with what we use in terms of assessment. And so I think we're a paradoxically overlooked population and underserved for that reason. And it's why physicians, and women physicians in particular, die by suicide by rates that are much, much higher than in the general population, as quiet as it's kept. So I
Right.
just have a heart to look at that and say, what can be done about that? All of these people are wonderful people. These are my colleagues, these are friends, but I know that when you are someone who appears to have it all together, people just assume that about you, and they don't ask you if you need help. And if you do ask for help, they're looking at you like you have two heads, or there's like really real consequences for asking for help. They ask these questions on the medical boards that are in charge of licensure and things like that. They want to know that information and might penalize a physician for seeking help. And so it's just this really quiet but like major problem that I see, and that I've always, or for many years now, have wanted to find some solutions to. And so
I
that's how I
I like that you have included it's funny because when I think about the definition, we always do rank it on dysfunction, right? So I don't think about treating anxiety or depression unless it's interrupting activities of your daily life. That's really the scale that we've been taught to use. And so it's funny, we call people functioning things, like functioning alcoholics, functioning whatever. And so you literally are like, well, can they function in the world? And so our standard is all about, do they still conform to the things that we think people should be doing in their daily life, right? And if there is a disruption to you being out of uniformity, that's when we're like, oh no, we need to fix this, because why are you not in uniformity with the rest of the population? But not actually examining, is there something going on?
Yeah, beneath the surface. Exactly. Exactly. There's that, the kind of the system that we're in and the standards by which we measure people's function, dysfunction,
Illness level.
need or
Yeah.
not need for help. But then also inherent in the medical culture is also this overworking, high functioning, hyper functioning, ignoring the way we feel, our physical
Oh,
need, no food, no bathroom breaks, no sleep.
yeah.
And the harder you work, and the more you buy into that, a lot of times it's celebrated. I came across
Rewarded with more work.
with that part, yeah. But like gold stars, I came across in one of the physician communities, one of the big Facebook groups, a post where somebody was started a thread about physician war stories, and there were like hundreds of comments about how people like, I remember this time when I passed out, like when I was on the shift, and they just attached the IV to my arm, and I kept seeing patients, or I went 2 days with whatever, like some major injury, right, for which they should be receiving care
Yes.
and still going to work. And the undertone was like,
Good for
if
you.
you don't have a war story like that, like you ain't real. Like
You're not working.
you
You're
gotta
not
go.
working hard enough.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
know this. You're not, they literally call medicine the trenches. Like we literally use military references to describe our experience.
Yeah. It's true. And so that's what I mean by high functioning is dysfunctional. Think about the
1000%.
mindset and the so many things, right? That would create a drive in a person to totally forego like their human, their basic human needs.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we really celebrate and over celebrate again this kind of militarized view of
Yeah.
our roles that really sacrifices position, and it's
Our
dysfunctional.
sense of self. I literally on this podcast talked, and I probably sent an email about it. There was maybe a couple of weeks ago, a pharmacist, retail pharmacist, who went to work, thought she might be having a heart attack. Did you see this story?
Mhm.
Okay, so she thought she might be having a heart attack. She started feeling all these symptoms, the chest pain, whatever. So she was the only one on duty. So she started reaching out to her bosses, like she needed to find someone to cover because she didn't want to close the clinic. Simultaneously, she's texting her boyfriend, and he's like, I hope it's not a heart attack. When do you want me to pick you up? Do you want to go to the ER? Trying to toss out some suggestions. And she's, yeah, I think I should probably go get care, but let me just figure out what's going on here at work with the schedule. And I guess it took obviously some time to coordinate coverage. So by the time the other pharmacist was on, it must have just arrived or was like right there, she collapsed and died. She really did have a heart attack. That was part of the post. And then there was a post within the same week of a doctor who was having like crazy pain on shift in an ER, and she was by herself. And she texted the group of other providers, and nobody wanted to come in and cover her. And so she worked her whole shift and then went to the ER and ended up being admitted. And so there is literally a culture that we have now bought into where we do not feel that it is acceptable to leave work, even if we're dying. And that is literally the definition of dysfunction. So yeah, you say that, and I chuckle about it because I'm like, oh, we're all dysfunctional, hee hee hee. But it is literally costing lives.
Yeah.
Such a
What,
devastating culture to be a part of.
yeah, it is. And
Yeah.
something that, yeah, it has to shift. It has to shift. That's insanity. So yeah.
Right. So you have a program where you are working with women physicians who are high functional, which is probably like 9% of us. And what is the shift that you want them to make?
I don't think there's just one shift, but I think if I had to summarize it, it's that you matter. You matter. I
Yeah.
think women physicians especially, I mean, there's the physician culture, but then there's an intersection like with being a physician and then being, that's a whole other thing. And then a Black woman on top of that, where
Yeah.
truly your needs go to the absolute bottom of the totem pole after the job and the patients, and then the significant other and the children and the aging parents, really low. I mean, if I had to summarize it, it's that you matter. You matter. You are a human being, right? You're not a robot. You're not a workhorse. You're a human being, and what you need and what you desire, how you think, how you feel matters. I was coaching a newish client recently, and she said that in one of our first sessions. She was just like, because I'm providing this safe space where she can finally talk about her, right? And
Yeah.
somebody's actually
Yeah.
interested in what she has to think and say, not just what she can do for somebody else. And she was like, she was taken aback. Thank you for listening to me, right? Thank you for letting me listening to my thoughts and my feelings. I felt like they were silly or they were invalid. And I think we get that message a lot from medicine and the world in general. And so, yeah, that's the biggest shift. You're a human
Yeah.
being.
Yeah.
You matter. All of you matters. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm a big proponent of coaching, of therapy, of any space where you get the chance to pour into yourself and receive support surrounding that, because that is part of the shift, the cultural shift. I think for you and a lot of coaches in general, I think our goal, especially when we coach other physicians, is that we are trying to attack the culture from various points of view. And so with me, I'm teaching people negotiation, and it is you have a voice, you need to use it. You have a right to ask for the things that you want, and the things that you want are not frivolous. And no, it is not crazy to not work a million days in a row. And no, it is not crazy to ask for a part-time schedule. And yes, you should be paid for X, Y, and Z, right? There are so many things that almost we need permission to ask for, if that makes sense. I think there's just such an importance in having these kinds of spaces where this client can come to you and just be heard for the individual and not this warm body in a white coat, which is what a lot of us are experiencing.
Yeah, warm body, or the other thing that we experience is being on some kind of pedestal. I think this is especially true amongst Black doctors, at least the ones I've been coaching in my own experience too. When you're the only or the first Black doctor in your family or only in your community or things like that, people can put you on a pedestal and they mean well, but it also separates you from the human experience. You can't complain or be stressed or need help because you're on like
Yeah.
that doctor pedestal. And so that's something that we talk about a lot in coaching, coming off of that pedestal. And again, just being a person who needs things sometimes. So
It's so fascinating how it literally is two opposing points of view, right? Because it's one that you don't matter. You just need to come in and do your work. You need to work harder and give more and more. And really, it's all about the patients. And so put all of your needs aside. You're not important, and simultaneously being told by your family, your outside in career, you have made it. You need to be in this position because there are not many of you. You are that important that you have to stay here. So both of those are what contributes to people staying in environments that do not work for them.
yeah, yeah, it's from both sides.
Mind work.
Yeah,
Wow.
between a
Yeah.
rock and a hard place. Yeah.
Literally. Because now you're fighting to, because now when you want to leave, right? I think that's the struggle. Like people who want to leave or who want to escape, they don't feel like they can, because who's going to hear their complaints? You're a doctor. What do you mean? But then from the administration, they're like, you're a doctor. You need to see patients. Like, chop.
Right.
That
Whew.
you are a doctor thing is not working for anybody.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's true. It's, yes, I am a doctor, but all the connotation that's being put around it, and therefore, again, you don't matter, or you're on a pedestal, et cetera. We can do with all the, all the extra, right? Because that part is definitely not.
Yeah. Yeah. I always challenge people to release their doctor identity, because it does have a meaning. And regardless, you have a meaning attached to it. You've assigned a meaning to it. Other people have assigned a meaning to it. And if that is your primary and central identity, you really will feel stuck and disempowered. Wow.
I I like the way you said that, and it reminds me of how I was able to escape the matrix before and do
Oh,
this
yeah.
now,
Tell us.
because I always did have interests outside of medicine. I do think that is really important. I always saw myself as having more strengths than just being a doctor. And I think sometimes you can really get sucked into the identity and everything else falls away. Even if you had other interests before, medicine requires so much of us that those things can fall away. But trying to hold some ties and just remember truly from an identity standpoint that before I was a doctor, I was Jeannie. You were Shanika. You had talents, you had gifts, you had dreams. And sure, doctor is something that you accomplished and do have done along the way, but it's not who you are. And I think that that has been really key and something that I would encourage
Mhm.
anybody listening to really think about. I have a client who spent 12 years totally burned out in her hospitalist job, wanted to leave for years, but couldn't bring herself to do so because of what she calls the golden handcuffs. There's the need for money and the pay is good. And you brainwash yourself sometimes I don't have other options, or this is all I know how to do. Really suffering through burnout for many years. And now after working together, she's pivoted completely out of that position. She works 4 hours a day. She makes more money than she did as a full-time hospitalist. And she has
Amen.
other, even before she made that pivot, she because we were working together, started to reconnect to her real self and her things outside of medicine. She's exploring hobbies. She started a passion-based business. She's reconnecting with friends. She's becoming her full self. And I know that's going to continue to be protective for her as she goes forward, even into a new career, because she's not just a doctor anymore. And it's something that she has found very valuable in coaching. It's really important to maintain those connections to the rest of you.
And to help you gain perspective, right? Because literally what you're saying, this is why I'm like, all of us coaches are attacking the same problem, but just from a slightly different solution. It's a different solution-based approach, because that is one of the things I also do with my clients. No matter the client, one of the first things I do is try to widen perspective. And some of that is, and almost for everybody, is let's look at the field of medicine. Let's look at the job market, just so you understand that you have options and you can literally leave that job and there are other options. The thought that I have no choice is what is killing some of us, right? Because we don't know how to gain that perspective, or we don't have people showing us that perspective. And like you said, we don't have other interests either. We've lost all the other interests along the way, all the other connections. And so when it feels like this is the only thing I have and the only thing I'm doing well, the only thing that I've been able to maintain, that loss of perspective is just damaging. And we are, as a result, we're literally seeing the manifestations of that in medicine as a culture right now, which is that everyone does feel burnt out. There are high rates of suicide. There's lots of people leaving the field because people just don't know how to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Especially the part about options. Again, you start to buy into the belief that this is all that I am, all I can do. This is the only job that it's going to pay the bills. And I'm like, for what I see now, and back then I thought the same thing, but now I guess entrepreneurship has opened up my eyes to medicine has been a great springboard, right? To do anything else I can imagine. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But it's a springboard for anything else I can imagine. And I would say this to anybody listening. You have a very valuable degree, expertise, skill set, but you can turn that into anything that you want. And so just recognizing that you have options outside of
Yeah,
clinical medicine is really important. And if you
that
love
is
clinical medicine too, I mean, that's fine. There's even ways to do that in a way that's sustainable. But yeah, you
yeah,
have to see that there are options.
yeah. And so for all the people looking, I hope you're hearing this message, because so many people are Googling, right? They're like, what else can I do? What are some clinically adjacent jobs? How do I leave my job? And yes, there are a lot of options. And also there's some internal stuff, like you have to believe that you are worthy of pursuing the options, and you have to believe that those options exist. So all of that is encompassed in coaching. So you want to tell us about your program?
Yeah.
What are you helping people do? Which we did cover a little bit.
Yeah. So Sanctuary for Women Physicians is my right now private one-on-one coaching program for women physicians. And the goal really is to help women physicians create lives that feel as good inside as the world sees on the outside. That really speaks to what we've been talking about this whole time. The women that come in are physicians, right? Successful in many ways. But as one of my clients had described herself coming into coaching initially, it's like a swan, right? Very graceful and beautiful from the surface, but underneath paddling for her life, right? That kind of person. I think we can all relate to that at various times. And so the work really is a lot of inner work. And when we do that inner work, life is just transformed. And like I said, people do see that they are more than a physician. They do have options. They can overcome burnout, but it really does start from within. Just like you said, it's one thing to know that you have options, but it's a whole other thing to know what's going on in your brain and deal with what's going on in your brain that's keeping you stuck right now and helping you get unstuck so that you can take advantage of all that life has to offer, not just your career, but life.
And also just even being honest with yourself that you want to leave and that you want something else. Because I feel like that was one of my struggles. I was like, oh, but I can't tell anybody that. I and I was doing it at the end of fellowship. So I was like, I haven't even worked anywhere yet. I got all this debt and I don't even want this job.
It takes a lot to admit that. I agree.
Yeah.
That's a huge step, early on step that has to be made for sure. Just admitting that's really what you want.
Yeah. That's what you want. And some of the things that I work through, I have a client that was when we talked through what her ideal day would look like, what her ideal life would look like. She was literally like, no one has asked me that. And since we've had that conversation, now that she's looking at jobs, she's like, how does this play into the role that I see for myself and the life I see for myself? Does this fit the picture? And so understanding and knowing yourself and being able to admit what you want is a huge step. And then that way it gives you your foundation for how to pursue everything else.
Yeah.
So it's like that's a place of power to come from. But
Yeah.
just having the space to sit down and have someone ask you, all right, so no judgment. What do you want? And then, okay, well, it's not crazy. It doesn't sound crazy. Everyone comes with these things, and I'm like, these are the most normal asks I've ever heard. Didn't even say anything that was outrageous, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I always love that. Okay, so if people want to find out more about Sanctuary, or they want to come in contact with you, where can they find you?
My website, it's my name, jeannielawrencemd.com/sanctuary. You can definitely connect with me there and learn more about how I serve women physicians. You can find me on Instagram as well. I know everything will be linked in the show notes, but it's my name as well, Dr. Jeannie Lawrence, MD. And I'd say those are the places I've been most active recently. So yes, please connect with me there.
Yeah, because there's a lot of women physicians that need to just have a safe space so that they can start designing these meaningful parts of our life, right? I know so many physicians who are like, oh my God, I would love to have hobbies.
Yes.
I would love to just like, I know it sounds, but I think because this is like a physician space, people will understand that sentiment that we've lost so many of those identifying things along the way, especially in medical school and residency. You don't have time for anything.
Yeah.
You don't have time to pee. You ain't got time to do a hobby, that's for sure.
Right. It's definitely been like since training, it's been like a slow, for me, it's been like a slow bringing that stuff back. Cause like you said, like
Yeah.
when you're in the throes of it, yeah, all that goes out of the window because it has to go out of the window and you do just become just a doctor. But if you are in that place, it's not like you have to stay there or be stuck there. And I agree, coaching can be a really great way to open your mind back up and start to reconnect with, yeah, the rest of you.
Yeah, that's so important. I remember some people had hobbies in residency. I was like, what? What? You do things? Not go to work and come home?
Yeah.
Like one of my co-residents used to bake these cookies, but they were like the ones that you do like the icing designs on.
Nice.
And they were like really extensive. So like everything that we had or any like someone's birthday or Halloween or whatever, she would make like a pumpkin one and they would have all the cookie cutouts. It's like, girl,
Yeah. That's nice to
where
see.
do you find
I didn't have anybody like that, Joe. I was just like, yeah, it's all about school and training and that's it.
literally? And if you had a lot of people in like half of our class probably had a family. So there was all these people that were just like, okay, I gotta manage my kids and I gotta manage work. And I was just trying to manage myself and I was having a hard time.
I'm with you. I'm with
So
you.
yes. Yeah. So okay, this is awesome. So all the women physicians who are feeling like they're functioning, but it's not enjoyable.
Working too hard. They're, as some of my clients say, existing but not living. They don't
Oh,
have any
that's a good
time
one.
for themselves. They're people pleasing. It's so bad, pleasing everybody else, right? That they no longer know what they want. Those are
That's a
my
good one.
right. They really want to create a life that feels as good as it looks. The ones that are tired of wearing that mask and that facade that everything's okay when it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Great. So people, you understand what Dr. Jeannie is talking about because we all know we have all of these tendencies. So yes, reach out. I'm like Dr. Jeannie said, it's going to be in the show notes. We're going to put the website, we'll put the Instagram, and then you can just direct click and link to those things. Any parting words for the audience?
I just want to tell you, thank you, Dr. Shanika, for this
Oh,
platform. Yeah, I think it's really, it's something I wish I had access to as a younger doctor who didn't know that I could be and do things outside of clinical medicine or do clinical medicine my own way. I think this
mhm.
platform really not only showcases the options, as you said, which is super important, but also starts it touches on like the mindset and the shifts that we really have to make in order to take advantage of that. And so I thank you for putting this out there into the world. I love physicians. And so I definitely want to see all of us winning and thriving. And I think this is a really great platform to help create that. So
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I'm feeling full.
yeah,
Oh.
as you should.
So yeah, so people get somebody to pour into you. We see how Dr. Jeannie's over here pouring into me. You need to get you a Dr. Jeannie. So just go ahead and click the links so that we could all start to shift how we show up for our jobs and in medicine in general. I think it leads to career longevity. I think it obviously leads to life longevity, right? It's all about creating sustainable habits that allow you to live in a really enjoyable way, not the drudgery, but like true joy. So thank you. I'm so glad that you came on and chatted with us.
I appreciate you having me. This has been a really great conversation. Thanks.
Yay. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye.